Hi, this is Shannon Torrance, and this is Magic is Real. Today, my interview is with Felice DiMartino. You know how we all say kind of casually, I could get hit by a truck tomorrow? That actually happened to Felice. And when she did get hit by a truck at one of the most difficult times in her life, Felice had a near-death experience. Felice is here to share with us what she learned after visiting the other side. I love this woman. She has so much great insight to share. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Felice DiMartino. Hello, and
Hello.
welcome to Magic is Real. This is Felice DiMartino, everyone. I'm so honored to have her on the show. I heard of you. I heard your interview with Jeff. Is it Jeff Mara or Jeff Mara? We aren't sure. But the
Mm.
Jeff Mara podcast, I'm going to say, which I recommend everyone check out on YouTube. Your story was compelling. I'm so excited to hear it firsthand and for you to share it with everybody. So I just want to introduce you and say thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Shannon, for having me. I love that you're doing this
It's my
and just
absolute
sharing the
pleasure.
information, finding a vehicle because this information is intended to be shared. It's so.
Yeah, I agree. So, what I'd like to start off with is I want to know, who is Felice DiMartino? Before you had your near death experience, what was your life like? What were your spiritual beliefs? What path were you on? Anything you'd like to share about, where you came from, what you were into? I want to know all about you.
So before the accident/incident, I had a career as a Montessori teacher and educator for over 25 years. I had built my career up to be speaking at conferences and working consulting for training centers and really expanding what I was doing in that realm. And I'm a mom, and so I was a mom, and my kids had gone off to college a few years before the accident. Both of my second one out of the house, and I was very active, nonstop. Wake up in the morning, go to spin class, go to work, do yoga, go to CrossFit. Every day it was 2 super fit activities a day. It was like constantly going. Yet in my work, I was called to be very present and mindful with who a child was in front of me. So although I was nonstop moving, I still was able to have access to some presence in the day because I had to. I mean, at the same time, there was a lot of multitasking, right? I'm like doing kids and going to board meetings and having to keep track of my team and all of that. Um, my spiritual beliefs and practices, I've had a meditation practice for many, many years, and I would go in and out of it. I would be super disciplined for a while, and then I would fall off. And then I'd be super disciplined. And I really was in this mode of moving meditation, like going to spin class or getting on my mat, even if it was hot power yoga, like that was more how I accessed all of that. And about 2 years prior to the accident, 2.5 years prior, I think it was, I was thrust into what I call resiliency boot camp. And major things happened in a very short amount of time, which cracked me open in a new way. And I had grown up in a loving, supportive family. Like, I didn't have any major trauma. I think we all have micro traumas that we don't even register as micro traumas, but it's in there subconsciously or maybe consciously that we don't think, oh, wow, it's not this huge thing, yet it can affect us in big ways we don't realize. And I never had any major conscious trauma. And until this period for a few years where I was in a short time, was dealing with my partner at the time, infidelity. He had an affair. My house had a fire. All my jewelry got stolen. Then my house had a flood. I had surgery on my knee. I became an empty nester. Like all of these things, boom, 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 kept happening. And I lost sight of myself. I lost my identity, really. Yet I always knew underneath something was there. Like I held on to that distant remembering of that place inside. And my spiritual, I took a leave of absence from work, and my spiritual practice really became more about gratitude and going through the ashes to emerge, right? Like doing some really hard work. And just as I came out of that, the accident happened. And I see how I co-created it. Because when all of that stuff was happening, I know I'm going off on a tangent. When all of that stuff was happening, there was this desire that was generated inside of me, not from my ego, but just this leaning into that knowing place inside that somehow, if I could use all of my experience of the resilience of all the things that I had just been through to help another person in some way, that it would all be, it would make more sense, right? It would be worth it. I either wanted to move into doing something like that or expand upon what I was doing at work with being present and mindful with small people and those that care for them. And I was kind of frozen in time. I didn't do any of it. And I could see and smell it and taste it. Like I could see what I wanted to be doing, yet I was kind of stuck and I wasn't taking action. So the universe dope slapped me and gave me an opportunity to show up in a different way. Yeah, I mean, not a way I necessarily would have chose. It's the how. We don't know how it's going to happen. It's so I know that was a very long roundabout.
It actually makes perfect sense. It actually it shows that you did have some awareness of the fact that this was a life challenge that you had to go through, and you did have enough awareness to say, okay, I'm going to take this as an opportunity and I'm going to find the gratitude in it. And it really sounds like you actually did have, it sounds like you did have a lot of awareness already, inherently, just from whatever inner work you had been doing, and that you were able to at least, I mean, those are some pretty life shattering events that happened to you. And I can understand your whole foundation is just shook. Now, a lot of people wouldn't even have an ounce of that self awareness or that spiritual awareness to say, okay, I'm being thrown these challenges, and how do I be resilient? And here are the tools that I can use. Um, some people just don't have those tools yet. They don't know. So it feels like you were already sort of on the path, which is why I do find it so interesting that the universe presented this to you in the way that it did. So tell us what did happen.
Yeah, just one more thing about that.
Yeah.
As I'm hearing you say it back, is I had spent time with a teacher from India. I mean, I had really delved deep into alternative living and spiritual practices, and then kind of put all of that aside, and I was just like in life. I was in it. And so, yeah, so there was the foundation for that, that then I was able to return to in a whole new way.
Right.
Okay. I'm gonna close my eyes maybe, because I'm really conscious and aware of when I share what happened, not getting to a place of repeating it by rote,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
by saying it many times, or like just to really share from my heart and from the experience. So on December 2nd, it was 2015, I was leaving work. I had stayed a little late to prep for a parent night the next night. and I left work and I walked off campus. My car was parked off campus at a lot, in a lot the school leased. And I walked to the corner to cross the light, to cross the crosswalk. And if I speak slow, I have a mild traumatic brain injury. So it also takes a little while. The light turned red. I looked both ways. The cars had stopped. It was like dusk and it was drizzly out. And I proceeded to cross the street. I remember I was like looking down and towards the other corner, and up from behind me, a big pickup truck came from up behind me and made a left-hand turn and hit me in the crosswalk. And I vaguely remember feeling a thump and saying something's wrong or something's not right, which is that's a later thing because that was stuck in my neck as I turned it around, as I reenacted what happened. And that's the whole body keeps the score thing. That's another conversation. So I was hit, and the next thing I knew, it came to me later that I whipped my head around. The next thing I knew, I was out of my body. I was looking down at the scene. I could see everywhere. I was pretty high. And there was like this bird's eye view of what was going on below. I had been, I don't know, 20, 30 feet from the crosswalk. And I looked like a chalk drawing. I was lying on my right side, kind of turned to the front, like on my front right side with my head cranked to the left. And there was 3 people that were standing there. And there were 2 women and a man. And the woman was hysterical, and I could see it, but not with my eyes. And I heard it, but not with my ears as hearing. I could just see it and hear it, though, from some other sensorial experience. And I heard the woman who hit me was pretty hysterical and said that she called 911 and that she had hit me. And the man was telling the other woman went to a diagonally to deal with the flow of traffic from the cross street that the woman had come down. And the next thing I knew, there were cars down the street starting to come. The next thing I knew, I was in another place entirely. And I don't know whether I traveled there or whether that emerged out from where I was. Whatever it was, I was in another place. And this other place was complete blackness. It was not black. It was black, and it was also warm. It was nurturing. It was expansive. And at the same time, I felt held, like as if I was in a cocoon, yet I was also expansive. And I was totally comfortable. There was no holding on. There was no worry or fear or gripping. It just was. And the next thing that happened was a presence that came I don't know if the presence came from somewhere else or emerged from the space. There was a presence other than my own that was very large and luminous and effervescent. Not effervescent, what's the word, is effulgence, like this light, like this beautiful brightness. And this presence was there for me to help understand, to answer questions, to help show me things. And it was as if the presence put, the way I describe it is like the presence shared information with me at light speed. It's like there was no time in this place and in this experience, yet it was as if I understood everything about my life and my circumstances at the time, and also about being a human being. And it's kind of like, the way I describe it is like if you put your forehead to someone else's forehead and you know in an instant everything there is to know about their life or your life, and every, like going through all direction of time, and and understanding, and being able to see things in different ways that are that are beyond your conscious awareness when you're human. I just, there was lots of information shared. And at some point, there was an urgency to come back to my body with this excitement and eagerness to integrate and to share and to apply all the information that had been shared. And I remember saying or assuring, or there was this sense of, I'm going to remember everything. And then I started to come back into my body. And I remember being out of my body, partly out and partly in. And I remember hearing sounds, and realizing that the sounds were coming from this body, although I wasn't feeling anything.
Yeah.
And I remember this density and this weighted feeling of like being like stuffed into a body. Like, although I was expansive and existing outside of my body, at the same time, there was also a sense of like this genie being squeezed in a bottle. And when I fully came to, I mean, there was some going in and out of consciousness. Like I remember hearing the sirens and saying, oh, the sirens are for me. But I wasn't like in my feeling physical body. And when I fully regained myself, I was being taken out of the ambulance into the trauma center, and everything was so harsh. There was like lights and organized chaos, and yeah, my head was bleeding, and they didn't know where the blood was coming from, and it was like I was like jolted back. And that's what happened.
Wow, that's really profound. And I know that you said, first of all, that's not obviously the first time I've heard that same thing. I think anyone who's heard an NDE experience knows one of the main themes is that when they cross to the other side, there is sort of a way of knowing, an osmosis, and
Mhm.
it's all telepathy.
Yeah,
Obviously, we're not bodies, so we're not using our mouths to communicate. We're not using our hands to communicate. It's just this all knowing. And I think all of you that I've spoken with and all that I've heard have said the same thing, that suddenly I just understood
yeah,
how it all works. It's not like someone has to diagram it out as we do here. Here we're trying to figure it out. Wait, so what happens when you die? You go to this level, and are there different
exactly.
levels? And there's some kind of a life review, and we're trying to understand it by our own paradigm, which we can't, because there's no time on the other side. And how can we possibly understand that? That doesn't make any sense to us. So I will ask that when you return, um, when you return, and I know we'll get into this because I'm not trying to jump too far ahead, but I do want to know, do you remember what you learned, what you knew at that moment where everything flooded in? Do you still remember it today?
Yeah, there are certain, when I came back, I did a lot of writing. I was in rehab for a while, and I had visiting nurses. I mean, I had a lot of fractures, and um, but I was pretty badly injured.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I wrote a lot of things down, because I was opening up, and a lot of information was
Mhm.
coming through, and I was vibrating at such a high frequency that the information was coming through to match the frequency and vibration I was at in this state. Um, there are there are some specific knowings
Mhm.
that are crystal clear as day, that um yes, the short answer is yes, I do remember. And it's it's been an ongoing, um not mission, but like, you walk with this expanded sense of knowing. So it's like, oh, right, oh, this is what it's about. So then you practice it, and then
Mhm.
and that gets complicated, because we're wired as human
Yeah.
beings, right? And yes, I do. I remember what I heard. I heard words from a presence other than my own, yet that presence, guide, whatever, that that presence that was connected in with my higher self, it's like that oneness, yet also separate, not in a dualistic sense, but I remember hearing, it's time to live big. Like, I remember that I heard before I came in. I remember hearing all is truly well. And I remember the understanding and the knowing of the depth of the level of forgiveness when I came back, and understanding that, and recognition, really recognition, and living the namaste, right? Like,
Mhm.
honoring and
Yeah.
seeing and knowing that essence and that divinity that exists in everyone, despite who someone's being in their humanness on the outside, like, that really exists. That solidified knowing that this is real, and being able to see through that now, that, like I said, I had been going through turmoil with someone in my life, and I totally got that he was just being who he was being. Like, it wasn't personal. It wasn't, we come here to teach each other lessons, to show relationships are our greatest teachers, right? It's showing us where we have the growing work. Like, it wasn't personal. So there was a deeper showing me of all of that,
Yeah.
and Ram Dass has this thing he says, Ram Dass, the
Mhm.
great teacher Ram Dass. He said, we are conditioned to treat people as who they're being, not as the essence of who they truly are. And what happens when we're empathic to begin with is we treat people as the essence of who they truly are, and then we don't have boundaries, and then it
Mhm.
becomes that dance, and then we're like, but I see your potential, I see your possibility, and that's not who they're being. And I really got that, oh, we can recognize and honor the essence of who someone truly is. and pay attention to who they're being, and pay attention where our lessons for growth are in it, and have boundaries. Like, it's okay. You could still acknowledge that love and that purity and that light that exists in another.
Mhm.
And people have different access to that, or access it in different ways. So
Yeah, you can love with an open palm, and that's something that took me way too long to learn. But not, well, I don't say too long because I think we all learn things when we're meant to learn them. But I was that person, that just saw the potential and the light in everyone, and
mhm,
let too many people in, and did not hold my boundaries. And now I
mhm,
think I'm able to say, okay, I don't like the way that person's behaving. I really need to distance myself from this. But it doesn't
right,
mean I love them less or have less
right,
compassion, because I always try to think of what led them to being that way. It's like
right.
perhaps they had a traumatic childhood, or perhaps it doesn't excuse their behavior, but it's an explanation that I can have compassion for. And I can say, well, it's not their fault they're mentally ill, for example, but it's also something that I can't really allow in because this type of behavior is toxic.
Right,
And
exactly. It kind of reminds me of the Byron Katie, like, there's your business, there's the other person's business, and there's the divine, the God's business, or the business of the divine. And so much of the time we get into other people's business,
yeah,
or we allow other people's business to get into us without having that, like, oh, actually, this has nothing to do with me. Like, this is their journey
yeah,
and where they're at. And all right, so
yeah, and I
that's
love
something we
that.
learn.
Yeah, and I like that you
Experience.
you were able to see it as, okay, this wasn't something that was personal. Yes, it
Yeah,
hurt me, but that was actually probably we in a way chose this, coming into
yeah,
this life, as we chose this interaction to help us grow.
right.
And so we can look
And
at it differently.
we'll repeat it until we get it. It's like, I really got certain things in the experience. And it doesn't mean I'm not human. Like,
Yeah.
you can know spiritual truths and have spiritual knowledge and have all this access to these high vibrational states and being, and working through it on this human, physiologically, biologically wired level um there's also that to work with. And it's so fascinating to me now about, and I love that science and brain research is supporting energy. It's like the merging of spirituality and science. It's so wonderful,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, so
Yeah, I know. One of my last guests, Mia Simone, actually
right.
has done a lot of research about the science. So that you may not even look at it as spirituality. It could be it's all one thing. And we were saying that science and spirituality are not actually in opposition to each other. It's all the same thing. I
Right,
mean, where does the
exactly.
science come from? Where do the elements of science come from? And that's the greater question. So now, when you had to return to this body in which you were in a lot of pain, and
Yeah.
were you able to process what had happened or what you had seen on the other side while you were in this type of um while you were in this type of pain, or were then you just kind of like in the body and focusing on that?
So when I came back, um, I was in I was hyper attuned. I could hear a mouse sneeze. Like, my my hearing was super attuned, and I was, there was so much concern about my physical body. I had a fractured pelvis, a fractured sacrum. There was internal swelling. There was
Yeah.
all sprains along my right side. I had staples in my head. There was so much focus on that, and I was in, like, whoa. Part of it probably was shock and trauma of my body. Part of
Yeah.
it was like having this experience, and part of it was whacking I mean, like I said, have a mild traumatic brain injury. It's like the proprioceptively, it was very hard to separate. I was just
Yeah.
merged with everything. And I remember being in rehab, and I saw Dr. Oz was interviewing this woman. Have you heard this
No.
before? Okay, so Dr. Oz was interviewing this woman, and I don't know who this woman was, but she was explaining that she had this experience, and she described it as like, imagine imagine your hand. Imagine this is you, this is me, this is the other person, this is the sister, this is the mother, and everyone's separate, yet we're all merged in, and this is the oneness. And I don't remember if that's the way she said it or that's what my takeaway was it, but I remember saying, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I experienced. That was the experience I had. And then 6 months later, I was talking to a friend and she asked if I heard of Anita Moorjani. And it turned out, I was like, oh, that was the woman I heard. Like, I looked into it, it sounded familiar. And then I looked back. And, I had started to hear and see, like, my clairs were turned way up. And I was starting to receive messages and channel information. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, if anyone read my journals, they would think that I'm like totally crazy. But I knew and I would say who is speaking. And I was told specifically the different vibrations I was channeling. One, I heard Akasha. So then I looked up on Akasha. Like, I don't know. I wasn't, that wasn't my realm of dabbling before, and just different channeling that occurred. So there was definitely this access. And over the years, I've kind of honed in on and kind of cultivated certain things, because what do you do with all of this, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's
I think that answered the question.
It does. I actually was going to ask you that as well. First of all, Anita Moorjani's book, Dying to Be Me, is one of the greats. I love it. And I actually studied with Monica the medium, Monica 10K. And in her book, and also in class, she talks about when people ask, well, how is it like, where, I don't understand what's a soul versus a spirit or whatever. She says it's like a clementine, like a tangerine and orange. And you've got the clementine, and it's one big thing, and that's your higher self. And then or people will ask, how could it be that we reincarnate? Because how come a medium can bring through my grandma if she's already in another body? Well,
right.
That's what the question was. And there's this higher self that we all have, this higher self. And then each piece of us is a little wedge of the fruit. So we can be, and because of the no time thing, and because we can be in multiple places at once, which is like what? And then this was always my question. Well, how can we be talking to my grandma if she's already reincarnated? Well,
Yeah.
you don't lose grandma. She can be grandma, and she can also be a child in India, and she can also be, a man in a different country. You can be all of the things at once, which is really hard to fathom. But the fruit, that's our higher self, and that's where it's like it's the source of what each of us come from. And then I think there's also the greater source, which is where all of these little clementines come from. Or maybe it's all one thing, but it makes sense. I love that she said that. And now that you say it, I remember her saying something like that.
Yeah, I was also, so two things that just brought up for me is I had that same question.
Yeah, so did I.
And I've done a lot of studying, like I said, in the last 5 years, and a lot of refining of these skills. And it's almost the way it's been shared with me, which really resonates for me. It's like the spirit is the flavor of your soul. Like the spirit is like the essence, the flavor, the specific flavor of your soul, your unique soul, right? And and what I love, again, with quantum physics and science now proving that different planes of existence exist at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and it's so interesting, like even when you think about collapsing timelines, if like your future self, and if you make a choice in this moment that is aligned with how you see yourself to be in the future, you're bringing the future to the present. It's like all of this amazing ancient wisdom that's being presented in new ways
Yeah.
and scientifically supported. And there was something about with Anita Marjani. So, for a while, I didn't want to listen or hear. I didn't read about anyone's near-death experience. I didn't want it to color
Yeah.
how I explained what happened. Until I had my own was like way of integrating the experience. And then I started to like listen a little bit, say, oh, it's so interesting because there's so many overlaps about how people express it and explain it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that. And the other thing I wanted to say is, it's so fascinating to me that there's Kundalini yoga, right? And there's working with the chakras, which I heard your last interview.
Yeah.
And then and everyone has their own language with how to describe the same thing. Then you go to a Joe Dispenza workshop and he has you breathe and like, all right, breathe it up, breathe it up, breathe it up to the center of your head. And he doesn't say Kundalini, like rising it and stimulating the pineal gland, yet that it's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I love it. It's different. It's language that different people understand. So it's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, I forget the name of that phenomenon, but it's where you start to learn because I've read Joe Dispenza too and all of it. And so it all starts to form. You start to see the parallels and you start to
Right.
see what parts match up. And that's why I was never religious because I always felt like there's truth in every religion. It's like I feel like we're all talking about the same thing. We just have different interpretations of what it is based on, our human experiences. But I think all religion comes back to there's something greater than us and there's a
Exactly.
higher, there's a higher something that we're all
Exactly.
from.
There's the thing I just remember what I wanted to share is when I was at a family friend's graveside funeral, and the rabbi was talking about his soul, like where the soul goes and the essence and what happens. And the way he described it totally gave words to what I know that I know that I know. Like we all have a knowing.
Yeah.
It's uncovering the knowing. We all have a remembering and a knowing, and we can access this place of knowing that's connected to source through meditation and through certain practices, which that's the whole thing about grounded illumination. How do we ground it and have these experiences and ground the wisdom and the knowledge in our everyday lives,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And this rabbi so I told him after, I said, the way that you just described about where the soul goes, I had a near death experience and this is what I experienced. So he wanted to hear about it. And he said, what you're describing is in the Kabbalah, that's this place. And then there's this place. Like he validated, and he validated just the existence of those ancient mystical traditions and spiritual traditions that religion and dogma sprang from.
Mm-hmm.
They are so connected. I mean, they're all saying the same thing. But
Yeah,
anyway.
and I always used to wonder, and I'd wonder aloud at times. But how do we know that what's in, say, the Bible is happened or what? And now I'm starting to see that it's because it's people like you that brought the information back.
Right.
In a
Right.
lot, it's when they say it's channeled, I'd say, yeah, but I get that, but it also is subject to being misinterpreted in certain
Right.
circumstances. But when
Right.
you have actually crossed over, and you haven't even crossed over forever, it's like we know that there's still something even for we don't even know what it's like to stay there and what other levels there are past what you felt and experienced,
Right.
that and everyone, it seems like when people pass and come back, they go to different stages. Sometimes they just have a knock on the head and they kind of just like cross over for a second, see it come
Right.
back. Sometimes it's like they're under for, like Dr. Eben Alexander. It's like
Yep.
he's in a coma and he's kind of like floating around in all these different experiences. But it is the people like you that bring back the knowing and the experience. And I did want to ask you, when you hear channeled information, what does it? How do you differentiate it between? I mean, how do you differentiate between your own thoughts and channeling for you? What does that feel like, so that you know it's not coming from you?
So what I started to do was I actually, when I feel it coming on, it depends. Sometimes I have like because it just will happen. Sometimes I can invoke it or ask, and sometimes it just happens. It's like this whooshing feeling
Mm-hmm.
almost. And I've started to speak it
Yeah.
or I write it. And it's language. It comes through in a voice that's not my voice. And the words and the language is so different than how I speak.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And everyone has the ability
Mm-hmm.
to open up. It's just that we're not practiced at it.
Right.
People, and just like with the different clairs that exist, we can have a leaning towards one, and that's one for me. This clairsentience and clairaudience and claircognizance. I mean, I could just know how things fit together like a puzzle, yet and those are my more uh cultivated,
Mm-hmm.
yet. And I came back with inclinations to that. So with channeling, it's kind of like you start to know when it's your own thoughts or your ego
Mm-hmm.
coming in, if there's questioning, if there's doubt, and then if you just get out of the way. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
it does. I
Yeah.
mean, it
And
totally does for me.
recording is amazing, because like I'm recording, I'm like, who's speaking? It's wild.
That is
So yeah.
crazy. And I know I
Yeah.
was just having a conversation with another one of my guests who's a friend of mine, Clayton Silva, this morning about, my developing mediumship. And he was saying, we were talking about that. And he goes, I'm hearing that you're in doubt and that he goes, why are you doing that? He said, let's talk about that. And I said, it's this feeling of um, having, as a human being, having to give over total control to something we can't see and
Yeah.
have blind faith but I have to give it, for me to be the best medium I can be, I have to trust 100% that I'm not making it up, that I'm not guessing. And I have to get up on stage and not know my lines and fully trust that spirit's going to do the work for me. And my human brain is resisting.
Yep.
I'm like, he's like, because you're not wanting to let go of control. You're like, I have to be right. I have to. And it's that going, okay, I believe in spirit, but I said, I heard a voice in my own head saying, how much do you trust me? Like, you have to show me how much you trust me. And I'm like, yes, I have to trust you to the point where I'm willing to jump off a cliff without a net and just go, I trust you to use
Exactly.
me as a
It's
channel.
be the whoosh. It's like being
Yeah.
the conduit. Marianne Williamson says being the faucet, right? Like you're the faucet, and it comes through. And it's so interesting because I heard you say, I believe in spirit, but, right?
Yeah.
It's the buts. But it's the what comes after the but. And it's also, what I've learned in my trainings is just saying the thing, getting comfortable saying the thing. And it sounds like you practice this,
Yeah.
of even if it sounds crazy to you, like,
Yeah.
oh, there's a little poodle that's jumping on your head. Like what?
Mhm.
Like maybe that means something to the other person,
Yep.
right? I have these spontaneous moments where people or people who've passed, the essence and the soul of someone who has passed will come through. And it's funny because I wasn't necessarily what's the word, inclined to mediumship, yet it's really calling to me lately to really delve into it more. So sometimes it spontaneously happens
Yeah.
over the past several years. And I mean, I also had an experience. I was with my grandmother when she passed, and that was a wild experience. That was well before the accident. Um, and so someone will come to me, and I'll share with the person it's intended for what they said. And she's like, oh my gosh, like it means something. She's like,
Yeah.
that's the color she was wearing when she went
Yeah.
into the water, whatever it was. It's wild. I mean, that's that evidentiary mediumship where you just share the information that you're getting, and it lands for someone because it actually is real.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. you know?
Yeah, I know. I did a reading the other day and I said, I'm just going to tell you everything I see, even though this to me seems like a nothing. And I said, I said, I see this house and just a sliding glass door, and there's a pool in the backyard. And I said, but it's just cement. There's no grass. And she goes, my husband loved our house. I didn't like it because it had a pool, but there was no grass for the dog to run around in. Like to me, it was just like I was just seeing a backyard. There was nothing
Exactly.
about it that seemed relevant to me. And she's like, no, that was the thing. Is I'm like, but there's no grass back there. And he liked it because of the pool. But she's like, but there's no grass. What's a pool if you don't have a place for the dogs to run around? And it was to me, I'm just like, I don't know. It's just, I see a house and cement. There's just cement and a pool, and it's incredible. And then later in the reading, I said, I see him with a wheelbarrow and there are bricks in it and someone's laying brick. I'm like, was he a carpenter or something? And she's like, I don't know. And then later when she's telling me how he passed, she said he passed in a plane crash and it's just, he hit the water like, it was like he hit a brick wall. And then she goes, every time I tell that story, I say it's like he hit a brick wall. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the weirdest way that they communicate because
Yep.
I'm like, what could that mean? And she's like, I don't know. And then when she says it, and so it's the way I just said, I can't believe the way they communicate. It's so clever, and yet it's not what we're expecting.
Right. Right. It's amazing. I mean, that, like, it's amazing. And you would never know that,
No.
and I think, right now, since during the pandemic and in these times, there's such a shift and people are opening up to awakening more to this, something more, that
Yeah.
there's something more, right? And people are willing to step into the unknown more and embrace the unknown more. And it's an amazing shift, on the planet right now.
It's surprising because I was expecting so much negativity. I was a little nervous about putting this out there. Like,
Yeah.
I was expecting people would be like, "You're crazy," and I'm sure there are people that do think that. Not one person has said anything. The only people that have said anything are people that are saying, "This is so cool. I've always been curious. Could I get a reading? Can tell me more about this?" And I love these interviews that you're doing. And I fully expected most people to be like, "What's happening?" My cat's having a little bit of a fit. She wants to,
Backward.
but I fully expected that. And I'm finding more and more people as the years go on are totally open and
Yep.
to it. And I don't know if it started with, these mediumship shows like the Long Island Medium, and people either think, oh, it's all acting, or I think it's opened it up to a wider audience where
Yep.
it's mainstream now in a way that it wasn't
Yes. Well,
before.
and a lot of things, like whether it's mediumship or even Reiki, right? I do
Yeah.
Reiki. I'm a Reiki healer and other intuitive healing modalities that I've trained in and studied in, and it's becoming more mainstream in
Yeah.
that regard, like hospice Reiki, or
Yeah.
and also, or just people going for Reiki and the benefits, and again, that there's now some people want medical proof, and that's becoming more and more available now, right?
That's right. I
And
actually,
also the measuring frequency and measuring sound and measuring vibration, like, it's just amazing to me because it's like, it makes sense to us because we're attuned to it, right? But when people do need more evidence based, that's starting to exist more and more, which I find super exciting.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And I want to ask you about, because of all of the stuff you've learned, like what services you do for other people in terms of like Reiki mediumship. And I just
yeah.
wanted to make a comment about Reiki before, because for anyone who doesn't know, it's energy healing. And I Reiki level 2 certified. And the other day I was babysitting and the mom came home and she's like, oh no, the garbage truck woke up the baby. She's like, he's just not going to settle down, but I don't want him to see me because then he'll get up. So she said, can you just go up and just see if you can get him down? And he was quiet. She goes, so that's it? He just went back down. I said, yeah. I go, yeah, I did Reiki on him. I go, yeah, I just did Reiki on him. And she goes, of course you did. And literally
Right.
all I
Yeah.
did was I didn't talk to him. I just, and he just went. And I've tried that with babies before and it's worked. It works. I don't, it's
Uh-huh.
really incredible. So I would love to
Uh-huh.
hear like, what were you doing before? And what kinds of modalities have you adopted? And do you offer actually do you offer as services? I think you do. I think you do is what I'm
Yes,
trying to say.
I do. So I feel like this information, having a near-death experience and coming back, there was not, I don't say a mission because that's like a mission.
Yeah.
It's the imperative and the guidance is sharing the information in whatever way it supports, helps, encourages, inspires, comforts another person, because that's where all, you know, death and dying, that's inevitable for everyone. And even now, right, like with the virus, it's been there, that's people's worst fear.
Yeah.
So sharing this information so that people can live their life fully without that fear, and to access the light that does live inside of us all, and
Yeah.
to have ways to access that, and to have ways to move through the fears and the ego and all the stuff, the human drama, and access that place of source and know that all is truly well.
Yeah.
um, and there's a lot about free choice and free will, and I'm working on a mentorship program about this, about how to incorporate all of these things that were shown to me and shown to many people. I'm just the messenger, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's that, and it's any ways that I could guide or support or share this information so another sees themselves reflected in it, to see their own divine essence,
Yeah.
is really was the imperative to come back. And I do that through Reiki, and I do that through energy healing. um this body of work called infinity healing, which is,
Hmm.
it's science and energy medicine and mentorship, and even just counseling, right? Counseling from a place of um holding space and witnessing someone and helping them guide their own intuition, because what I found is so much of the time we play small. That was the
Yeah.
whole thing about living big. We play small so much. And how do you play big? It doesn't take getting hit by a truck to play big, right? I'm also super passionate about changing the paradigm around aging that we have in our culture. There's so much focus on, uh, I don't know. It's like in other cultures, aging and growing older, there's a certain wisdom from experience that comes with that,
Yeah.
and people get frozen or stuck, or not know what to do when they reach a certain age, or not want to change careers. And it's like all of the intuitive nudges and the knowings that you have in your heart to go for it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot around that on my website also.
I love that. Please mention your
Yeah.
website now. I'm also going to put it below, but
Yes.
yeah.
It's groundedillumination.com. And the grounded illumination part comes from, we could have these nuggets of wisdom through our own experience, yet still repeat the same behaviors over and over, or not listen to our intuition over and over, and then end up getting hit by a truck because you don't listen to your intuition, or whatever it is. Like, how do we strengthen that connection with that place and make choices from that place, make conscious choices from that place? Yeah. So,
That you articulated that so beautifully, because most people I know who went to the other side and were kind of shown, if you go back, Anita Morjani included, and my last guest Wendy, saying you have a purpose,
right.
that there's something for you to do. And in Wendy's case, she said, "But what was the purpose?" And they're like, "I'm not going to tell you. That's for you to figure out." But
That's
the
for you to
thing is,
figure out.
yeah, but it feels like that it's such a wonderful, the message always seems to be being of service, but also putting people in touch with the awareness that they are a soul, their divine selves. And because we do walk the earth, and I've really been working on getting out of that judgment space of
Yeah.
judging other people. In fact, yesterday I was irritated about something and I couldn't even bring myself to say something negative about the person. And I was, because I'm practicing so much just not being judgmental, but it's so easy for us to make judgments and there's so much conflict going on. But I think the other side of the universe, or God, whatever you call it, um, or all of those things, which could be separate. I think not separate, but a separate entity, sort of, whether it's our guides or God or whatever you're dealing with. They want us to live here and be grounded and fully experience life, and not with our head in the clouds, but with the
Right.
knowledge that we're here to like lift each other up. We're not, dragging each
Yes.
other down and goes against God. That's not what we want. And so it's those people like you and anyone who's seeking, even if they don't even know it's coming from a spiritual place, that they're
Right.
doing good and
Exactly.
they're helping others and they're trying to be forgiving, which is hard.
It's
Um,
really hard. And, the thing is about any spiritual practice or any ways that we live life is not to bypass it, not to either have the spiritual bypass, like, oh, it's all beautiful and light and love. And all is, for me, that was really hard because I was like, oh, well, I should know better. Now I had this experience and all is truly well, because it really is.
yeah.
And people have free will and choice and discernment, and things aren't always all is well in some sense in the human realm, because
Mhm.
things just kind of suck sometimes. Yet, we have a choice to look at the things that happen in our life as happening to us or for us. And yes, things happen to people, yet we can make the choice. How is this for me? Is a question
Mhm.
we can ask ourselves. And, without the bypass, right? Like, oh, I noticed, like, I've been doing a lot of somatic experience work and really getting in my body because it's so easy for me to just go out. Like, that's my happy place.
Mhm.
Like, of course I want to go out. And we live in this world, in these bodies, and what an amazing gift that is. It's like, it's said that earth is the planet of manifestation. Like, we get to have a full range of experiences and work through these places of, oh, I notice that I'm gripping on to resentment right now, and noticing it and not judging ourselves for it, just allowing it, like, okay, where do I feel that in my body? Coming back into the body so we don't get lost in the thoughts about it, right? Because then we'll go so down the rabbit hole and, like, okay, ego, I see you. We can't
Mhm.
push things away because then they'll come back stronger. But how to live in the both end, both spiritual beings having a human experience, and actually spiritual beings having spiritual experience, and human beings having a human experience. So that was a long way of talking about the spiritual bypassing that it's so easy to sometimes do. And
Right.
instead, cutting ourselves a break. If we notice, oh, I'm being judgmental, or that person's triggering me because they're judgmental, and then saying, are there ways in which I'm judgmental? And
Mhm.
not judging that, but noticing it,
Yeah.
you
It's the
know?
noticing and the observation that's important, and being aware.
Yeah,
We're not going to be perfect. Otherwise, why were we put here?
right.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
To grow and evolve and learn. And
I know. It's so
yeah.
interesting.
And also, one more thing on my website is really using um, the experience of going through all of the trauma that happened at one time
Yeah.
to guide people to practical, pragmatic tools to navigate through, to build that resiliency muscle almost before you need it, right?
Mhm.
So if and when the shit hits the fan, you're not like a deer in the headlights, right? Like, you get to
Right.
practice accessing a place of peace and calm inside of you, or how to work around things, or switch your thoughts and thinking, like,
Yeah.
neurological. So yeah.
Right. And is there anything that I didn't ask that you think is important to share? Or it could be an experience, it could be amusing, no pressure at all. But if there's something that you've sort of taken from this whole experience and what you really want people to know, even though you've provided so much, I mean, everything you said is just fantastic. I just wonder if there's something, if you could tell somebody something, like anyone,
What's
what would you
coming
tell
to
them?
me right now
Yeah.
is that love is a state of being and love exists within us. We go looking for it, and returning to a place of self-love is where it all starts.
Mhm.
And really, I mean, deep self-love, right? And a way to do that is by acknowledging and honoring that divine spark within us, because that divine spark comes from love. It is love. It's what love is made of. And we can access that place within our own being and be from that place with others. And it starts to become a little easier, and then more and more easier to reflect that place within us, so another sees themselves in that reflection.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. I definitely believe that you were sent back here for this purpose, because honestly, as you've said before, it's so hard to put into words. It's hard to find the words because
Yeah.
it's a different reality. And you have put them into, I think,
Thank
very
you.
clearly into very clear, succinct words, descriptive and yet not so abstract that it's not something we can all relate to. And
Thank
um,
you.
you're
That's
doing that
really,
work.
thanks, Shannon. That means a lot, because I just started to share my story, and it's been 5 years. It's only been 5 years, and it has been 5 years at the
Yeah.
same time. If there's like, that seems like, whatever, time is irrelevant in that sense. It's just, it's still integrating, and it's still integrating, and how to express it in a concise way, or in a way that is really valuable for people, and succinct. So I'm working on the succinct, like, here's A, here's B, here's C. And that's why on my website, when I share my near-death story, the story of what happened, I put it into three categories of the three different: the all is well, it's time to live big, and we are so much bigger than our bodies. And all the understandings and the knowings that are now solidified in every cell and particle within me and around me. Because you can't unknow what that you've
Mhm.
uncovered, that you remember that you knew it.
Yeah.
And so it's more solidified and succinct on the website, and I'm working on it. So if anyone wants
Oh,
to help do that.
yeah, I love it. In fact, you were just of service to me today because so much of what you said was exactly, I think everyone who watches this, they need to hear that thing at that time, because
Yeah.
everything you said, I was like, mm-hmm, girl. Like, I really related, and I think a lot of other people will too. So I want to
Thank you.
thank you for the work that you're doing and for being vulnerable enough to share your story,
Thank-
and put yourself out there in the way that you are. And again, please say your website again, because I know I'm going to.
it's www.groundedillumination.com.
Well, this has been such a gift and a pleasure, Felice. Thank you so much. I can't wait for people to see this. And I'm so happy to see you. So I'm sure, there's still some physical repercussions, but just seeing you so, beautiful and glowy and just looking so healthy. Your life is such a gift as well. So I'm glad that you're
Thank
here.
you.
And
Thank you.
thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
who you be in the world.
Oh, thank
Really,
you.
what a gift.